Griots Books. And I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, joined by my capable co-host, Fubara Eneli Esquire. But today before we go into today's book, we have a special guest, Dr. Angela Carter. She's a visiting assistant professor of psychological science in the Africana Studies Department at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. That's UMBC for short. Her research focuses on the socialization of racial and cultural identities, Africana cultural meaning-making practices, and public history. Before joining UMBC, Dr. Carter was a researcher at the Ronald W. Walters Leadership and Public Policy Center in Washington, D.C. As a double alumni of Howard University, she earned a BSc in psychology, a BA in Afro-American studies, and a PhD in personality psychology. Dr. Carter is a Phi Alpha Theta National History Honor Society member and a recipient of the Winslow Sargent Doctoral Award. Yes. Currently at UMBC, she teaches introductory psychology courses that explore the Black experience in the United States. So you see why it is we're grateful to have our company here today. And today, we're going to be looking at the book written by Anna Julia Cooper, A Voice from the South. And so before we get into it, Ms. Cooper did say no man can speak well for women. So it's imperative that women lead in the conversation with regards to what is it that the women in the African-American experience. And so without further ado, I would pass over to Fubara Eneli if she wants to say something in the interim.
And I'm going to pass it back over to you to ask the questions. But really excited for us to be centering this book and centering the life of Anna Julia Cooper, who I believe does not get nearly the kind of attention that she should. Every single one of us should know this woman and should know her work, and it should be centered in a way that it's not currently centered. I see Dr. Angela Carter as certainly one of her children in terms of the work that she's doing. And I think that if Anna Julia Cooper were alive today, although we know that she is here with us in spirit, that she would be thrilled to see this young woman who got her PhD decades before Anna Julia Cooper did. Anna Julia Cooper was almost, I think, 70 years old by the time she got her PhD. But it's because of the work that she did that paved the way for people like Dr. Carter to walk the path that she did and to be able to accomplish what she has already. And I can't wait. I hope I live long enough to see all of the things that you too will accomplish, Dr. Carter. You're already on your path. But we know that Anna Julia Cooper was born in 1858. And so when we talk about the book and the concepts and the ideas that she was sharing even back then and how relevant they are still today, which on the one hand showcases her genius, but on the other hand, as a woman, as a human being, saddens me that we still have to be having these conversations, that book could be a book that is written today because we still have not effectively addressed the issues that she raised. That really concerns me. But at any rate, just really grateful for this space, that we get to discuss it and that we get to discuss it with Dr. Angela Carter. So, Dr. Carter, welcome. So, Dr. Carter, what is your take? Anna Julia Cooper, how did you get introduced to her, and what do you think about this work, this book?
First and foremost, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be having this conversation with you all. I was first introduced to Dr. Cooper, I would say, in Dr. Belethea Watkins' class in undergrad at Howard University. She taught Black women in America. And, I'm not even sure if she knows this, but this gives me the chance to publicly give her flowers, because if it was not for this class, I would not have joined the Africana Studies department. It was that class that really piqued my interest,
Mm.
and just how brilliant she talked about everything and about women I've never heard of before. And, of course, all the love and respect to the figures we know, like Harriet Tubman and Coretta Scott King. But in terms of other thinkers like J. Cooper, Francis, Watkins, that's a whole different canon. And also, they're situated further from the 20th century in our popular memory. So, hearing about this work and Black women in America just had me astonished. One, like I said, I hadn't been introduced to them coming straight from high school
Mm-hmm.
in Philly, and I had the privilege of taking African American studies because of the work I later found out that she was a part of, alongside Dr. Greg Carr, Dr. Mario Beatty, who eventually became my dissertation advisors. But unfortunately, those who write the curriculum don't also have the privilege of enforcing it. So it wasn't until I got to Howard that I actually see the way that they intended these courses to, be instructed. So that was my first introduction, but it's been a while since undergrad. And reading this book reintroduced me, and I'm older, and I have a more expansive now relationship with being, not a young 18, 19-year-old woman now. Now I'm starting to understand the issues of the cult of domesticity that she's going against. And so there's a lot of relevance today with pay disparities. Now that I can say I have a PhD, and I'm looking at my male counterparts, and we are not on the same scale, male, beyond the racial. So it is a very interesting perspective, I would say, for me to now be acquainted, because I am closer in the age. I'm 30. She wrote this when she was 34.
Mm-hmm.
So it is very illuminating.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The central argument of the book is that the educational, moral, and spiritual uplift of Black women would help elevate the race. Looking at the current picture in the United States, would you say that argument is still very much relevant, or we've moved further from that?
Huh. you know, okay. I think it depends, right? So we're situating her in 1892, and she's very optimistic about she's calling these things out. She's optimistic in the transformation. But here we are over 100 years later, and we're seeing the lack of incorporation on that gender line. As a Black woman, yes, I am in higher education. I had the ability to be around other women in higher education. But like I said, how is it necessarily trickling down? Because even though you have such a large number of Black women now who have a degree, why do we see those pay gaps? Why do we see those disparities? We're just now getting maternity leave and family leave being, something that's in the job market. So I I hesitate on some aspects, but of course, the accessibility or the capacity to be in these rooms, but the limitation of how much is said, um, that's something I feel like we still struggle with, right? Black women in STEM, that's a big thing because it seems to be, oh, such a small number compared to men. So we highlight that. So, on one end, I think, yes, there are strides, but how much, and how are we looking at it across the board?
I
So
totally agree with you. So this book was published, what, 134 years ago?
years ago, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
At the height of Jim Crow, lynching, black disenfranchisement after, the first Reconstruction period. And we're kind of reliving those times.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense of, okay, it looked like black people were getting ahead. We've had, quote unquote, our first black president. And then now we see all of these rights slowly or maybe quickly being pulled away. We look at the number of black women who are the most educated subset of the United States of America now being disenfranchised in mass,
Mm-hmm.
right? So even having clawed our way, quote unquote, up the ladder, fought for these rights, getting the education, often coming with a lot of of debt,
Mm-hmm.
we're still not guaranteed that once we have gotten a foot into those rooms, that we can stay in those rooms. Getting into those rooms has come at a great cost to us that we're still trying to figure out how to pay off.
Okay.
And even with that debt, you can very quickly get kicked out of those rooms, as we've seen with the hundreds of thousands of black women who overnight lost their very good paying jobs.
Right.
And so um, that liberation is still not something that is guaranteed, even when we play by all the rules.
Mm.
Mm, mm.
Very true. Very
Okay,
true.
so which leads us to the question: would you say victory has been for all women or some women?
This is where I think she really shines. And she doesn't call herself a feminist, right? But we
Mm,
know that she's a precursor to what eventually becomes Black feminist thought, Black womanist thought. And she's really good at separating.
Okay, Dr. Carter, I'm hearing your mentor, Valicia Watkins, right now. I think she just entered the conversation. Like, wait a second. Okay, but I'm going to stop there.
Like this idea that, for white feminists, it's this question or this centering of exclusion on
mhm,
gender. And Black
mhm.
women don't get that. So what they're fighting for is suppression.
Yeah.
We can't. We fear for certain acts of chivalry where Black women are like, I fear for my life. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it back home. That is very different than, not being able to host a meeting, or you're not worried about your bread and butter in that.
Mhm, mhm.
So she does an amazing job at looking at the fact that Black women don't don't get that leisure. Even in her conversations about coming across a public intellectual that was saying, oh, white women, when they labor, they need rest and recreation and they get to go to Europe.
Huh.
She says, Black women in the South are toiling. They're in the field alongside Black men, and they don't get that rest. As
Mm,
tired as I was after completing my dissertation, I wish I could just go abroad, right? Take that time off. But no, right back to it. Had to find a job. So Black women don't get that right. So this is where that womanist argument comes in, into that culture element. White women don't get to that cultural. They pretty much stay in that gender lens because race doesn't impact them that same
mm,
way.
mm. And Sister Aya, what's your take?
Absolutely, in terms of what the black woman experience is, that the commingling of racism and sexism simultaneously. We don't get to, as a black woman, I don't get to ever just say, okay, I'm just now a woman and not black, or I'm just black and I'm not a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is, well, let me give my life right now. I'm not at home. I am traveling. I'm with a sister friend who just had surgery for cancer, and I'm here providing some support after her surgery,
Mm,
because we are often caregivers for
Mm-hmm.
family members, for loved ones. Well, that required me taking time off of a job. Fortunately, I am self-employed, but that also means, if self-employed or not, that's going to hit
Mhm.
my paycheck.
Correct.
Um, we don't often get that time to, like Dr. Carter was saying, just say, "Oh, let me just breathe," and someone else is going to carry the load.
Mm.
We are, as Malcolm X said, we are the muse of the, no, is it Malcolm X? Or no, he said we're the most disrespected.
Disrespected
It was
women.
it was Zora
Yeah.
Neale Hurston that said we are the muse of the world. But it's like we're constantly working. When we leave one sphere, we go into another sphere and we're working. But the idea of rest, the idea of we just get to take a break,
Hmm.
is not something that we are afforded by white women,
Mm.
by white society, and then when you come into the black community, by the black community.
Hmm.
So whether you talk about our black institutions, black women are often the ones behind the scenes toiling, making everything look great, even though we don't get the credit up front.
Yep.
We're not the ones in the front getting the glory and all of that, but we are the ones who are there to set up ahead of time. We are the ones who are breaking down after the pictures have been taken, even though we're not in the picture.
Yes.
And we are the ones who, after that, will go back home to make sure that the kids are put to bed. And, oh, by the way, we planned for what breakfast is going to be consumed the next morning. Oh, and that the laundry has been done so that whoever is going to be taking the pictures the next day has, clean clothes and looks great. And this is just constant.
Mm.
And it hasn't changed. And so when she says, when and where we enter,
Hmm.
the whole race enters with us, that still resonates today. And we need to be having that conversation within the black community as to what changes in how we see the role of the black woman, particularly as we see this proliferation of conversations on the internet about black male female roles and
Mm.
traditionalism and so on and so forth, because in those conversations I'm not hearing any rest for black women either. But I digress. Let's go back to a voice from the south.
Okay, so speaking of Voice of the South, she raises a particular question, and I think it transcends just the South. She said there is this particular vulnerability and abandonment of Black girls in the South.
Hmm.
Could you speak to it in terms of, obviously, she was writing about the South at the time, but then if you look at the entire global sphere and to hone in on the United States,
Hmm.
would you say we've made progress, or if we haven't, what do we need to do?
That's that's a great question, and quite loaded. She's talking about the horrors of, the sexual exploitation of Black women, and she mentions how for white women, uh you have, what does she says, the White Cross League of the English, that
Mm-hmm.
you have these programs that's enforcing this purity, or this sense of piety of white women. And she looks at Black men and she's like, hey, I
We
know
could do
that
the same
just
thing.
20 something years ago you just got the ability to really be in a light where you can fight and advocate. Because Michael
Mm.
Gomez talks about this as formation, that the violence, the sexual violence against Black women being so prevalent is another thing that made Black men realize these are our mothers, these are our daughters. We overcome whatever tribalism we have and dealing with this Black suffering. So she kind of brings that back
Mm.
to men. Like, hey, we're not coming, unlike white women, we're not coming at the ability or the fact that you can vote before us. I never get that notion of, being upset at their ability to be enfranchised, but what are you doing with that enfranchisement? How are you talking about what's happening in the South with these Black girls? There's no intervention programs. I saw an article about asking about male exceptionalism when it comes down to this idea of like the endangered male species and masculinity. But you don't see that with Black girls, even in the classrooms, right? We know that Black girls are suspended at higher rates because of subjective reasons, dress code, talking back, right? Where for white students generally they're suspended for objective reasons like vandalism, right? You stole something. So I would say no. And looking at human trafficking, right? She's talking about sexual exploitation then and how unsafe it is for Black women to travel. You have now Black women at a higher level being trafficked than anybody else. This hasn't stopped, right? In terms of Black women and the trafficking, it's been this way for the past several centuries. So, yeah, there needs to be more protection and more agency. Um, Things that impact us, like the Crown Act, right? Hair. What does that mean, to be in spaces? Hair care is huge for Black women, Black people in general, right? Anyone. But it's a big part of the self-identity, and the fact that now we can't get these jobs because we're seen as being unkept. So I would say there's many ways that we could look at Black girls being an afterthought, Black women being an afterthought.
I totally agree. When you brought up the issue of sex trafficking, being in the area that I'm in right now, the number of young Black women who seem to be disappearing on a daily basis, I'm like, wait a second, how is nobody really investigating this? That there's got to be a ring
Yes.
that can be discovered here. These all of these girls are not just vanishing into absolute thin air, and they are Black and brown girls. Of course, we know that when a Black girl disappears, she doesn't get nearly the kind of attention as when a blonde-haired white girl disappears. We understand the statistics in terms of the sexualization of Black girls from very young ages versus white girls. We understand even what educational opportunities are made available to white girls versus Black girls, just in terms of what people educators think they are capable of. So when you talk about the suspension rates, and once you start suspending a child and you start interrupting their education, they're going to the alternative education programs, or now they're in that school to prison pipeline, what that means for their lives. When we look at the number of Black girls in the foster care system,
Yes.
and then how many of them now become abused within that system, and then we often talk about the number of Black men who are incarcerated, but we also need to look at the growing numbers of women who are Black women who are incarcerated, and many of them who are then sexually abused while incarcerated, who are having children while they're locked up, and then what happens to those kids. And so there's so many layers to what's happening to girls, what's happening to women, that oftentimes when we talk about what's happening to Black people, we make it male centered, and when we're talking about what's happening to women, we make it white people centered, white women centered. And Black women just never, Black women, Black girls just never get their day in the sunlight, if you will. And so our issues are not effectively addressed. Even when you talk about health issues or health disparities,
Yes.
why do we have such a high level of autoimmune diseases amongst Black women? Why do we have such a high level of fibroids
Yes.
amongst Black women? And it's starting with Black young girls with, bleeding. Let's not get too graphic, but, a lot of issues with their menstrual cycles and so on and so forth. And these things are just not studied and not addressed effectively, and how that affects their quality of life. Because whatever you're going through, you're still required to show up
Yep.
and perform regardless. And these have long-term impact on what we're able to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The maternity rate, you saying that makes me think about those disparities, right? And even though we know that Black women are at risk, right, for these higher mortality rates, what's being done in terms of doctors having to take training, right? This is what I mean about these intervention programs, postpartum. We know from looking at the psychiatric side of it, Black women's pain is seen as non-existent, right? Like white women being hysterical, oh, we'll give you a pill, it's fine, you'll go over there, you know? Whereas with Black women, there is no consideration for that. No, you can take it, you'll be okay. And it's very unfortunate because, of course, Dr. Cooper talked about the fact that if you don't protect the women, if you don't protect the person that is a part of the progeny of the race, and also that maternal sensitivity, there's a loss of humanity. Uh, so I wonder about just the lack of compassion when it comes to Black women.
Mm-hmm.
So, you raised a very important question there, Dr. Carter, with regards to the importance of women's role in the progress of the race. And so, which leads me to ask the question. She she did raise a question, which is the call for genuine equality, not placation. I mean, you're all aware of the diversity and inclusion, equity and inclusion program that was pulled back the moment our dear king got into power. So, which is placation in itself, which means there was no genuine idea of moving change forward. The question is, how do we counter that in view of the fact that we live in a quite capitalistic system that, you know, has commodified everything to the point where it is the bottom dollar as opposed to the humanity that determines what gets center stage?
I think I think it's a part of expanding women's ability to discuss things outside of the home, right? And taking that, I think about TikTok, right? And I have these influencers like Nora Smith, who's going viral for being what they call like trad wives, right? These traditional wives,
Yeah.
millions of followers. She has sponsorships and things like that. But women who are talking about the economic sphere, higher education, it's muted. That engagement
Crickets.
isn't yeah, that engagement isn't the same. Uh this when and how can women contribute to the conversation is I think something that maybe we might have to get back to with the club formations. We see that with Anna Julia Cooper, we see that with Josephine St. Ruffin. Do we need these organizations again to kind of, expand this conversation of women not only in higher ed spaces, but the social uplift, having a say and more of the curriculum aspect. We look at family cultural resources in terms of, educational outcomes. So having a parent that's able to, help you with your homework, with usually with Black families going to work, right? It's on a sibling, it's that aspect. So it's like getting involved on both sides, economic, social, curricula, across the board. Hope I didn't get away from your initial
No,
question.
no, no. I mean, it highlights the point that, again, once women are missing in the equation, things tend to just take a nosedive. Sister Aya, what would be your take on the same question, which is this placation as opposed to genuine equality? as part of our programs.
I would say that men need to have some conversations with themselves to discuss really what manhood means to them and what it means to be human in the world.
Mm.
Because so far, it seems that for too many men, manhood is defined as somehow being able to be above womanhood,
Mm-hmm.
like the opposite of having someone that you can lord it over.
Yeah.
And if that is your definition of manhood, then there's this constant butting of heads that we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're expending so much energy on the wrong things, which is to the detriment when we talk about the Black community, which is definitely to our detriment, especially when we have so many other outside forces that are looking to harm us, and then we are busy harming one another. And so for Black men, because I'm centering our community, for African men, whatever the term you want to use, for people of African descent, what does it mean for you to be human? What does it mean for you to have this Y chromosome? What does that mean for you and how you show up in the world?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you then see yourself interacting with people who have the XX chromosome?
Chromosome.
Mm-hmm.
Or we can start getting into people who are transgendered and so on and so forth. Because as long as there's this conversation of I'm the
Dominance.
opposite of, or I have to be on top, I'm the head of,
Mm-hmm.
then there's this constant friction that takes place. So who are you in and of yourself outside of a woman?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think men need to have that conversation. So even when we're talking about sexual abuse and we're constantly focusing on what women shouldn't do,
How
don't
they,
wear this outfit,
yeah.
or don't go out late at night without another a group of this, or make sure you have a man to protect you and all of that. I'm like, wait a second, why is the onus always on us?
Mm-hmm.
Why is there not a conversation on, wait a second, why is it that if I don't care if I walked out butt naked, are you an absolute wild animal? You can't control yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
we, of course, know that sexual abuse and assault has nothing to do with how a person looks. It's a power dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, why are babies sexually molested? And why are 85-year-old women sexually assaulted?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about how I looked or whatever. It's something entirely different. But the focus is always on what was she wearing? Where was she? Was she drunk? She must have led him on. No, no, no. How about you control yourself? So when we're talking about this whole conversation, um, I would like men to also hold themselves accountable
Yeah.
for how they want to show up in the world and
Mm-hmm.
how they want to reorient their own the narratives that they are brought up with and what they're buying into, and how they want to show up. Yes. And then for women, also choosing intentionally to take up more space. And I'm saying that as a 55-year-old woman who, from my earliest memories, was raised to be a good girl.
Yeah.
How to sit, how to, be a good wife,
Mm-hmm.
how to learn how to cook and take care of the house, and how to carry the baby, and how to this, so that I could someday be somebody's good wife and somebody's good mother.
Mm-hmm.
I don't hear the same conversations necessarily for a man besides maybe being a provider.
Yeah.
But that emotional intelligence wasn't required of most of the men that I saw being raised around me, the boys I saw being raised around me. But and it was almost the same language we use with kids was, be seen and not heard.
But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And don't and then these tropes that we put on black women, and black women in particular, she was too loud, she was too
Loud, yeah.
aggressive, she was too this. Why? Because she was just being. And she's not a leader, she's a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And so for women, for me as a mother with both boys and girls, I'm telling my daughters, take up room, not in the sense of being, that person who sucks up all the oxygen in the room. You want to be mindful of other people, but not where you're shrinking
Hmm.
because you're trying to cater to other people's insecurities.
Yes. Yeah. You
And,
mentioned.
and yeah, please, Dr. Carter, go ahead. And then that's what Anna Julia Cooper tried to do and did successfully when she was enrolled in school. And she's like, no, I don't want to take the women's curriculum.
Yeah.
I want to take these classes. I can learn Latin and I can do
Okay.
mathematics and I can do all of this. My brain is not it's not shrunken. I can do all of this stuff. And no, in school, women can take these classes and we're capable of all of that. Um, yes, please go ahead, Dr. Carter.
Yeah, very important. Everything you said, I agree. It's That's such a formative upbringing with women, right? You have to know how to cook, you have to know how to clean. Meanwhile, the brothers, the fathers are, right there. You're human. You have to eat, sleep just how I do, right? So it's beneficial for you to know how to cook for yourself. You know what I mean? Um, so I feel like in the placating, oh, there's so much to unpack there. It's like, why am I seeing, she brings this up, that women learning the alphabet, right? As soon as they have this intelligence, that they're seen less than as a woman. And you talking about this aggressiveness. Why is this intelligence and this self-agency something that seemed to be masculine? I don't quite I don't get that. And having a Southern grandmother, I can recall conversations of, well, you know how to cook? You know how to clean? You have a boyfriend yet? 14, 15, but this is something that is ingrained. Think about the color purple, right? This is actually the generation, what, right after Anna Julia Cooper? You still see this. Um, it's fine, to have home ec, right? Even though they took home ec out of school,
Mm-hmm.
she talked about how you should have both. The what was it? The class that Dr. Smeets ends up saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to teach this, but it's just for men, and you're
We don't
past the
need it.
ladies
Yeah.
course." Yeah, but even their letters of recommendation, when she's applying to Oberlin, they say she has this unusual intelligence. Like, it's exceptional, and it's no. She has made it a point that you are not going to diminish her voice. You are not going to inhibit her agency, and she didn't care how it looked. But it's this idea of walking around on eggshells,
Mm-hmm.
maybe perhaps because of men controlling that purse, right? Controlling, you don't want to mess it all up. However, suffering, because who are you? Are you able to fulfill your human potential? So uh Ida B. Wells, other, like-minded women, it wasn't about what you think, is about what I need to attain and what's best for me and my race. So, and even struggling against Black men with that, like, oh, you're aggressive. Also, being from Philadelphia, that is a natural thing, like, it is a rough city. But just to say, as a woman, it's not easy. It wasn't easy for me to grow up, like, let's say a guy called a cat calling. If I didn't say anything, you learn, like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't want to, I don't, being very nice, even though you called me out of my name, you came at me very aggressively. I have to curtail how I respond because violence, right? So she's very accepting of knowing the limitations physically, right? I might get a quick two-piece, but I have to run. Like, I'm not going to sit here and really try to fight, a 250-pound man. But if we're talking weight of intelligence, I'm not diminished in that capacity
Yeah.
whatsoever.
Yeah.
So I don't feel the need to be, or this idea of having to be a quiet woman.
Yeah. But when you're not a quiet woman, how society exacts a price from you. So, we just had elections in the state of Texas where I live. And some of the criticisms that I was hearing against Jasmine Crockett,
Yeah.
Mhm.
you know, she not demure enough.
Oh yeah, very
Yeah.
mindful, very demure.
She's not
Yeah.
very demure,
Yeah.
you know. I remember when I was getting started with my law degree and pursue my law degree, and some of my aunties, my mother's friends, like, wait a second, don't you already have 2 degrees? Yeah. Are you married yet? No. Well, you might want to get married before you get any other degree because you're going to chase the men away. It's like, what? Well, I know people who didn't get degrees and they still didn't get the men. So what do you want me to do? It's
Yes.
like,
Like what? Yes, yes.
because you're really not complete if you don't get a man. Something is
Mm,
wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
mm,
And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think you know what? Interesting, vice versa for men, right? Oh, you don't have a wife, you don't have kids, and it's like, why is
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
It's very interesting, and she does a really good job, Dr. Cooper,
Yes.
of explaining that we don't we don't have to compromise. It doesn't have to be a dichotomous thing, right?
mm.
Whether it's in an educational space, whether you're looking at moral uplift, there's a balance here. And she brings out that analogy of the earth, right? And these very conflicting and opposing forces, but yet working together to
Together.
hold
Yeah.
that gravity.
Mm,
So I feel like, life isn't easy for Black men, right? That whole
Mhm.
super predator, I
Mhm.
don't quite know what it's like. Just, you can't speak for me. I can't speak for certain things as well.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like to walk down the street and, have somebody cross or shrivel up because, I'm bigger than you. And, that
mm,
to do
mm,
the nod and somebody not give me that nod back,
Mhm.
those types of slights on your humanity. So, but in terms of Black men, and she's nice about it. Ida B. Wells calls it out like Du Bois just kind of side swipes.
Yeah.
Um, Seeing that, hey, your stuff matters, but so does mine,
So
and
does
it
mine.
needs to be on par. Like,
mm.
yeah,
And of course, she paid a price for that. We know that she was removed as the principal of
yeah,
M school because some within our community did not agree with her stances on
Approach.
education
Yeah.
and
Approach.
equality in that sense.
yeah. The sacrifices that so many we won't know because it's not written down.
Mm,
All the women who were turned away from these universities. She
Mhm.
talks about the women who have to go abroad because they can't even get accepted to these universities.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
And she had to go abroad for her
she had
PhD
to go
yeah.
abroad,
Yeah.
and
and learn a whole new language in order
Language.
to get her PhD.
and did
Yeah.
not get any slack.
Yeah.
She's an elder, right?
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
goes to France, and they're like, if you're not back here within 30 days, your job is gone. And she has to hustle. If she's sick with the flu, right? She has to hustle, get back here. And I read that her students applauded when she came back that first day because it couldn't have been easy, right? But you were going to give her job away. She's been
Mm,
here for decades, at this point. So also looking at that lack of consideration, she was the fourth woman, to get her PhD. She's
PhD.
doing
Yes.
something great. She's doing something remarkable.
At age 70.
Uh, you know, and she says that when it comes down, all a Black student or all a Black male has to do is just proclaim that they want to do something, right? And then you have these resources, right? We're going to get together, we're going to allocate it. But for Black girls in the South, it's active pushing back. Why do you want to do
Yes.
that? Like you're
Why
saying,
do
why
you
do you
want to
want to
do
get?
that?
Whereas it's like, oh, you want to do that? What we're going to find for your Black son, we're going to make that happen, right? You don't even have a whole plan, but here
mm,
she is sending letters to the president of Oberlin, getting friends to talk to the president of Oberlin, saying, I'm going to tutor, I will work, I will do whatever I have to, and she does. She's essentially an educator, I would say, over 15 years because even at St. Aug, where she starts, she's tutoring.
Yes.
She's so
mm,
advanced,
mm.
Um, it's it's fascinating to see that lack of compassion. And I don't know if I have a male counterpart example to that, but I was shocked just because she was an elder.
Yeah.
And she had to come back and forth to the Library of Congress to continue and did it
And did
came
it.
and did it and came back to Howard and formally, was given a ceremony, and she says, thank you, because these sacrifices I did for my people. She doesn't say women, she doesn't say men, she says for her
My
people.
people.
And it is, you know, beautiful how inclusive she is.
Speaking of inclusivity, she did take a swipe at the suffrage movement. I mean, which ties well into the Kamala Harris's campaign and how, as she puts it here, I mean, she did name some names: Susan B. Anthony, Reverend Anna Shaw, noting that they came from families of plantation owners, yet claim to be fighting for universal universal equality. Wow, that's wild. So the question would be, since that we have this kind of we had it then, now we have it again. What are we not doing properly in terms of, let's again focus on Black women in the role, that in terms of suffrage, you've seen how the voters' roll has been scrubbed, how there's this new idea to ensure people carry IDs, and you know what that impact will be on married sisters. How is it that Black women have not been able to capture the space to actually advocate for themselves, not just on the state level, but on a national level, which is what Anna Julia Cooper is calling out in this essay?
You know, it's when I remember when Kamala Harris put it out, you know, I'm running. It was right. I was on a Zoom call, I think that same night, with a record number of women who raised that money, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But what did we see? It wasn't the same thing for our white women counterparts, right? Showing out. They still voted according to their race there. So all the campaigns that Black women did, I know it was calls for Black men as well, but that short time of campaigning and raising those funds, and ultimately what happened, because it's a democracy, it's a national level, that wasn't the case. It wasn't incorporated. So I feel like, you know, unfortunately for, you know, Kamala, it's that realization, just how it was for Hillary, right? At the end of the day, are they willing or accepting of a woman having a higher position or having an authoritative voice that could go against men, right? Did you not like the idea that a woman would be able to say yes or no, we're going to do these things, or I'm going to incorporate this social agenda? I'm very curious about that. But in terms of what Black women did to support her, I would say is very comparable to those saloons and those movements that we see among Black women, those club movements. So there needs to be more done on the gender lines, and that's her whole thing with white women like Susan B. Anthony and Anna Shaw. Ironically, not the same thing with, well, not really ironically, but the Grimke sisters are different than, you know, they're talking about these issues, these abolition problems that the South isn't, you know, willing to deal with, and also within white women themselves. So without that critique and white women doing the work, there's going to be a lack of incorporation. It can only go so far.
So I don't think we go very far until we dismantle patriarchy, which really undergirds white supremacy. And white women hold up the patriarchy. They wholeheartedly buy into it. If white women decided today they were done with the patriarchy, that thing would collapse. But they hold it up. They buy into, you know, they want to be, they benefit, or they think they benefit from this idea of their virtue being protected and them being revered and put on this pedestal, and their men are going to protect them even though they don't. I mean, can we call out Epstein files just to begin with?
Come on.
Shoot, we don't need Epstein files. We can go to the Bible The Bible, there's nothing but abuse of, not, well, there's more to it. Please, Christians, don't come for me. But there's a lot of abuse of women in the Bible.
You know, she says that too. I'm sorry, not.
No, no, please, go
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
Uh, she talks about how, I think in what, like the opening chapter, how the purity of women is reinforced by these biblical standards, but
Yeah.
not the same thing, right? Women have to be virgins. They have to have this virtuousness to them. But she mentions that it's a bishop who has like 14 kids, or it's not the same thing for clergymen. So what does that what does that look like for men? How are you virtuous? How does that correlate with your body and your sexual autonomy? So the Bible being that
Yeah.
I don't want to say strangling voice, but yes, very repressive in terms of the purity aspect.
So as long as white women believe that they are benefiting from their own oppression through the upliftment of white supremacy and patriarchy, they are never going to link arms wholeheartedly with black and brown women for the upliftment of women. And so I'm not looking to them. What I am looking to is for black and brown women who outnumber white women across the globe to tear to cast off the way that we've embraced the patriarchy, mostly through religion,
Yep.
and to go back and remember true spirituality that also centers our humanity as women, that centers the divine feminine, that does not feel that the masculine needs to be above or feminine needs to be above, but sees this twinness, if you will,
Yeah.
this notion of ma'at, right?
Yeah.
And that once we get to that place and we can remember again, then we stop participating in our own oppression. Because right now, within the black community, within the African community, women are also the ones holding up the patriarchy. So although we know women in mass in America voted for Kamala Harris, we also know that there are quite a few of us that could have voted that did not register, and there are those of us who registered who did not vote.
Yeah.
And there are those of us who could have told our husbands or our loved ones, and if you don't vote for her, this kitchen is closed, and maybe that's manipulative. But listen, you got to fight for what you believe in.
She mentions that though.
And we didn't.
Looking at that. Yeah, like she's like, how dare black Democrats come home and say that you voted against the interests of black women, right? So the same, you're right. What happens when this is basically what, like the story of Chirac, what happens when you say no?
I ain't cooking. I ain't doing nothing.
Yeah.
Go get whatever you need with whoever you voted for. How about that?
Right.
And many do. They go find it, and that's okay. And we're just clear. So we definitely have a lot of healing to do, a lot of remembering to do, and I think reading, and for those who haven't read Anna Julia Cooper and sat down with her words, reading her words, thinking through it, thinking about our own experiences today, is a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
In
So-
terms of getting to a better place. Yeah.
So she poses a very, almost a rhetorical question, but I'll ask it all the same. She said, does America have a race problem? If so, how can it best be solved? So which means it doesn't?
Oh yeah. Oh yes. 100%. 100% is a race problem. But even outside the American land, she mentions colonization and what's going on in Africa, because now by this time she's writing is post the scramble of Africa, right? And she
Yeah.
talks about how all these things are connected. Eventually, capitalism, um, and this issue with race in America causing this limitation once it, of humanness. That's her whole thing, right? It's not just women, it's this lack of fulfilling this potential. So even in terms of the religious aspect, she's like, God, help those who help themselves. Like, she doesn't necessarily just give it up, but she's like, we need to take a real stand. She says everybody should be saying, I am my sister's keeper, because it's visible what's going on with Black men. We see these issues. Now we have the ability to punch in Google and see a statistic. Like when I was looking at the sexual assault against Black women, I think it's like 1 in 5 Black women deal with that. So it's like that's a racial issue of Black women having these disparities. So yes, across the board, education, psychology, job. I mean, however you want to put it, it comes down. You can't get a. That's the whole thing with Black feminism, and intersectionality. You cannot exclude race from gender, and vice
Yes.
versa. So both and yeah,
So she brought this up long before, Sister Crenshaw did.
yeah.
She didn't call it intersectionality, and I know there's scholars that will push back against that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that we need to always label things in that way, but because I actually, you cannot cut me into sections, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I just have never been able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But just this notion of you cannot separate these things out, these aspects of who we are out. She raised that a long time ago. So does America have a race problem? If she were here, I would ask her some questions, and I know some of you would say, well, aren't the answers obvious? It's like, what is she referring to when she says America? Um, we talking about the notion, the concept of the nation state, the American government, like what aspect of America? Um, and if I were to take it from that perspective, then I would say this country has a humanity problem.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, this is a country that voted against women having rights at the UN.
Yeah.
This is a country that voted against
Food being
Food.
being a
food
right.
as a human right.
Yeah.
Like, who does that?
Yeah. To cut off what SNAP? Who cuts off SNAP
This
for
is
children?
this is a country that has no problem with a $4 million missile, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
drone interceptor, but you will not
Eight
give
people.
people
No.
health care.
No. No.
So yeah, this country has a human problem. You don't have any problem with these oligarchs making money hand over fist. I mean, literally, if you taxed these oligarchs just 10% of their profits, you could eradicate world hunger,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they could still live great. Where nobody's talking about,
You don't need billionaires, you know?
we don't.
Not
And
even
here
if
they
people
are
want.
in a race to who will be the first trillionaire. And we're shoveling through the policies, you're shoveling more money their way while you are undercutting regular people every day.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, mm,
Mm-hmm.
I just heard about truckers who the clock doesn't start until you get into the truck to start moving your load, but you have to show up whenever they tell you to show up, even if the load isn't ready, and you're not getting paid for that time that you are waiting, and they're not getting paid any benefits, and they don't have any health insurance. And I mean, and this is all legal. And so it's more than a race problem. And that's what even those who are holding up whiteness need to understand. that you may think, oh, well, this is just about black people and you're getting ahead, or this is just about the immigrants, the Hispanics, the Haitians, they're eating the dogs and eating the cats, whatever. No, they're literally killing you all. It's a slow boil, but they're killing your nation is killing you as well in your whiteness. And your whiteness isn't saving you. So I think America, I think if Anna Julia Cooper were here today and we're having this conversation, she'll agree it's certainly there are racial components to it, but this country has a humanity problem.
So I'm minded that we're coming to a close. But before we do wrap up, I'll give you a chance, beginning with Dr. Carter. What would be your takeaway from this book that if you were to tell somebody else, that would be your honing in points to say, you want to read this book because?
I would say for me,
As an educator as well, so.
as an educator, you wanna read this book because she doesn't just situate the problem, she offers solutions. And oftentimes we can critique, but the first half, right, of the book is setting up to the issues of Black women. And then the second half is talking about how you can, rectify and include them in what they need and want. So I feel like you read this book, of course, to get this precursor understanding of what eventually comes to be frameworks, right? So if you want historical perspective on that, sure. But if you want to sit with a thinker who very deliberate about how she frames themes, because even as she's poking at what Black men is not doing, she's still looking at how far we've came, So I feel like she allows us to get out of this Western notion of dichotomy and binary looking. And, even though she is an author or a scholar of the classics, she's looking at these very African ways of still being, right? Of both and collectivity. So I feel like she's offering a way to improve the human experience and to break free of the limitations that procedure gender. It is, I think it's a very formative way of looking towards the future. She prophesizes so much. Unfortunately, that has not changed. But on the flip side, you do have a much higher rate of women now in education, right? So you see somebody who lives through the promises and failures of the Reconstruction era, the nadir, the what she dies in 1965. So almost, at the precipice of the woman liberation movement of the 70s. And that's a whole new generation, right? Angela Davis, all these thinkers. So I feel like if you want a good entry point on what emerges as Black femininity or these experiences throughout the 18th and 19th century and 20th, look at Anna Julia. Look at her contemporaries. Look at Ida B. Wells. Look at how they revere their elders and these movements with Harriet Tubman. I mean, she's perfect intellectual genealogy with, just uplifting other women. So yeah, a lot I could say about needing to read her stuff, particularly now that we can, because for a long time it was out of print. And some things we may not actually have, right? Because she's such a public intellectual, these pamphlets. We're talking like 1883, 1881. A lot of these essays that's included. So now that we have the ability and so many people are talking about it, let's do the work to recover it. And especially what you all do, right? You consistently uplift the voices and histories of women that may be known and not known. And that's the important work that needs to continue. And I thank you for this ability to not only be a part of the conversation, but to watch, these discussions about women that I did not know and reintroducing me. So I think in order for her not to be, an afterthought or put on the shelf again, we need to center her in educational philosophy across subject matter. She's not just this feminist thinker, right? She's this formative leader on, like I said, across genres, across philosophy.
Sister Aye, your takeaway? I mean, you've talked about her before, but let's.
Yeah, and she lived to be 105 years old. What an incredible life. So, sometimes when we read these books and we have these conversations, there are segments of our community who feel, oh, okay, this is just for those intellectuals, those, people
Hmm.
in academia and all of that. And what I would say is that I would love to see us be able to take this book in her words and follow her example in addressing some of our day-to-day conversations in our community, male female conversations that we're having, because so often now it seems to be very adversarial, and maybe it's the social media thing. You got to have clicks, so you
Yeah.
got to one up the other person, punch down, and so on and so forth. But as Dr. Carter was saying, she addresses the issues. She's not sugarcoating anything, but she's very much looking for solutions, and she's not putting any group down, or she's looking at things very holistically and looking at it from a very Africana way of resolving issues. What's true is, as she said, we only get ahead if we're all going together.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Black women, if we get ahead and our brothers are not with us, we're not going too far.
Yeah.
And Black men, if you think you're getting ahead and the sisters are not in that, we're not getting too far. So
Hmm.
bottom line is, if we understand that, we can use how she frames things and her analysis to help us have these conversations that sometimes feel difficult, to really come to a place where we are working hand in hand towards solutions, because there's a lot of hurt in our community that is not necessarily being inflicted on us by outsiders. Yeah, the trauma from the outside is helping to feed it, but there are things we're doing to each other that we have the power to stop.
Yeah.
And I think this book can be an entry point for us, even if we're not in academia.
Yeah.
So would like to see even those who are not in college pick
Yes.
up this book, and let's work through it, and let's listen to this ancestor, because she has a lot to share.
Yeah. And plus her prose isn't, too Du
Yeah,
Boisian. It's not
yeah,
inaccessible, right? You can
yeah.
read it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Mm, I need to do more in my classes actually, and full disclosure, elevating and not letting the sun rise and set with the male Du Bois versus Washington kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? Elaine Locke only when we talk about philosophy, or Frank Snowden in classics. So doing a better job of evoking her into these spaces. Thank you for that reminder.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And with that, we've come to the end of this month's episode of Books and Grill. For those who are just coming in, we've been talking about Anna Julia Cooper's A Voice from the South. Um, as you've heard, she's spoken to the ages, but it's still relevant to today. So you do yourself a favor, go to your library. I'm sure they have copies.
Yes.
And if you do walk into an old bookstore, like some of us do, you can get a copy. There she is. And so, um,
That book is very readily accessible now.
That
yes, yes, yes,
yes.
yes, it is.
But
Yeah.
you know what? I was looking at this one, and this
Mm,
is the Louise Danielle Hutchison book. So this was the Smithsonian exhibition that really touches on the historical side in terms of like her family and
Mm-hmm.
all the deep controversies with M Street. It's a little harder to find. But if you ever see it at a second rate bookstore or somewhere out thrifting, grab it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Liberate the book, as they would say.
And I just want to lift up our amazing sister. I'm so incredibly proud of you, Dr. Angela
Oh,
Carter. Listen, you all, we're going to save this one for the archives because, you know, she's never not going to be accessible, I believe, but this is a sister who is doing amazing things. I cannot wait to see your dissertation in print where everybody can access it.
talk
She's
about so.
brilliant.
She sat through my
She
2-hour
is
dissertation. So
She is gorgeous. She is a mentor to younger women. And men. You're just so awesome. I had the honor of traveling in Kemet with her for a couple of weeks. 2, 3 years ago, and you're just phenomenal in every way, and so incredibly
the
proud of
model
you.
from the
Yeah.
model herself. That means so much. You make me cry. Thank you. Thank you.
And even that last part again was what Anna Julia Cooper would have wanted. So
Yes.
it's the perfect, and then women raising up other women, and as they would say, that's how it's done, you know. And with that, yes, we've come to the end of this month's episode of Books, Griot and Books. Next month, we'll be looking at the Negro in the Caribbean. So until then, it's good night and God bless.